Hello, everybody, and welcome to our TBReaders Phantom Plague Q&A with Vidya Krishnan. I'm Michelle. I also go by Llama Drama Rama on Discord, and I'm going to be the moderator. And we are so happy and excited to welcome Vidya to our TBReaders Book Club. Vidya Krishnan is an award-winning writer and journalist based in India. Her writing focuses on medicine, public health, and the way they interact with class and race. She is the author of Phantom Plague, How Tuberculosis Shaped History, which was the second book that we used for our TBReaders book club. Vidya is here today to discuss Phantom Plague with us and to answer some of the questions submitted by the TBReaders community. So Vidya, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you. I wonder if you could begin by telling us a little bit about how you got interested in public health in general and in tuberculosis in particular.
Oh, Michelle, thank you for having me. And I'm such a big fan of what what fight you guys do as a group and how you come together and frankly been effective in ways that we have a lot of lessons to learn from how you guys organize online. So equally a fan. How I got interested in public health. I was a sports reporter for the first couple of years of my career. But then I tried 8 or 9 in newsrooms are organized the way police stations are. So we all have beats. So I tried 8 or 9 beats, which is crime and court and a bunch of things, sports, before I ended up on public health. And I grew up in Bhopal, which I don't know if you're aware, 2 years before Chernobyl, an American pesticide plant leaked Union Carbide, leaked methyl isocyanide, and half the city was killed overnight. And it kind of everything that I bring to journalism was taught to me by that one single story.
Oh, okay.
Um, it happened in 1984. I was 2 and I was not in Bhopal at that point, but my family relocated to Bhopal because my father used to work for UNICEF. And after the Bhopal gas tragedy, there was such severe need for public health reinforcement and aid that I was among the people who moved to the city after. Uh, and I have always been fascinated because this one story about Bhopal was actually fought in the courts, but it was about how caste and class and gender, and because it was cyanide poisoning, it affected women differently and it caused like spontaneous abortions. And then in India, then the social thing structures came into view because when women could not have children, our patriarchal, mothers-in-law would just send their young brides back saying they're infertile, and those kind of things. So I have always been fascinated by how health kind of comes together to be the most injustice, most cruel way to deny someone their right, like their human rights. And it also intersects at a point when they're the most vulnerable. You are asking for help from someone you don't know as a doctor, and you trust this doctor, and then they take advantage of you. And I love how gender and all of these things, I like to pry these things apart. And I guess that set me on the long road to this rabbit hole of tuberculosis that I fell in.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. We were chatting a little bit before we started, and I brought up the fact that I think myself, like as a physician and part of the American medical establishment, I I found myself getting like a little bit defensive reading your book. You have a lot of fair criticisms of the way that we run medicine and the people that we serve or don't serve. So it's very interesting to read from that perspective. Um,
Yeah.
I think the first set of questions that a lot of people wanted to ask you about has to do with the patent reform, which is the patent system is another system that you really criticize a lot in Phantom Plague. And so I guess the first question is, if as you suggest, we get totally rid of the TRIPS agreement and the whole international patent system, what incentive do you have an idea of what system you would design if you were allowed to just design the whole thing from scratch to make sure people continue to make new drugs and we actually, have some sort of incentive out there?
So, thank you for that question. I don't know how much you know about like Eastern culture. My background is I'm a Brahmin woman, which is the equivalent of a white woman in my country. I'm upper caste. And Brahmins in Indian society, this is a meandering way to answer your question. Brahmins in Indian culture are scripture keepers, protectors of knowledge, and priests. They work in temples. And then there are businessmen, then there is the trader class and the warrior class. And then there is this, it's like a casata. There is like a layer cake of, that's how ancient Indian society was divided. And this patent system is so Western, but it is intrinsically so exactly the same as, essentially protecting knowledge, putting up this thicket of wall around information. So in India, oppressed caste minorities are not allowed to into the same schools. And again, Dr. King has said James Baldwin, there are many, many writers who've spoken about how education is so crucial. And I feel like in the 21st century, the TRIPS agreement essentially, in the book, I argue how it's directly a descendant of this colonial chokehold that former colonies, former empires had on Asia and Africa. And, I fundamentally don't think that public health should, you know, be one of those negotiating tools where you even have this conversation, oh, what incentive do I have to be in this game? Um, because if you need incentive to save someone's life, you probably should not be in public health, starters. But then to bring more nuance into it, I personally think it's a bean counter's imagination of what public health can be. Because in your country as well as mine, I feel like the governments have become a part of the comorbidity that we all live with. Our taxpayer funds are being funneled into wars that we don't need to fight. They are being funded into creating billionaires that also we don't need. But when it comes to healthcare, we immediately go to, oh, but what's the incentive? And of course, if even within that rationale of, okay, let's take that on like good faith face value that you do need an incentive to get in, and it's not good enough that it's the right thing to do, and it's a human right that is enshrined in several global treaties, including the constitution of various countries. um, Even with that, I really don't understand why pharmaceutical companies need a 20-year monopoly. I don't understand why they need a 20-year monopoly, especially on a compound they have not developed, that they have procured from a publicly funded university, which was the case with bedaquiline that I wrote about in the book. But this is true for coronavirus. We saw during COVID, where we forget that the first vaccine candidates came out of Oxford University, and the Gates Foundation was very instrumental in how it ended up with AstraZeneca, and how the manufacturing of COVID vaccine was concentrated to one pharmaceutical company. And then this Paul Farmer used to talk about this creation of scarcity. This is a false scarcity. And we keep talking about health in this way as if it's a pie, and if I give you a piece, I will have less of it. Instead of thinking of it, I personally believe, after 25 years of covering public health, that Professor Cornel West says this about love, that in public space, justice should feel like love. And it's true for public health as well. When your institutions should feel like they love you as a citizen, not because not because you will spread a disease, or not because, if you don't contain it, it'll not because it's profitable to save you. And I feel like this kind of extremely um, entirely financialization of global health is actually exactly why we are now in a position that the Trump administration has just pulled the rug out of, post-colonial nations who were already very fragile. The entire global health structure was, it's like skyscraper that was basically propped up by toothpicks, because everything was philanthropy and aid. And I feel like so long as we keep talking the language of economics, we will keep losing the battle of talking about healthcare as a universal right that we all, we are entitled to. It's not someone's to give us.
Yeah, I like that image of a skyscraper held up by toothpicks. Um, and I think that makes sense. I think I had to read a book at some point in med school that had a chapter called Healthcare is Not a Normal Market. That just sort of pointed out all of the ways that capitalism and healthcare intersect in a way that is detrimental for patients. Um, is there anyone that you know of, any group that's fighting for reform like this, who's advocating for policy change?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There are so many. One is the my absolute favorite campaign that was fought was in South Africa. It was called Fix the Patent Law, FTPL. I also am a big fan of Yale University's UAEM. Do you know of that group? There were students who universities for allied medicine. I'm not sure what it's called, UAEM. It's again a student-led group, and they specifically fought patents. I'm a very big fan of MSF's Access campaign, which was based out of India. If you remember, during the pandemic, India and South Africa moved WTO for waiving the patent monopoly on COVID vaccine. And the biggest fight against patent monopolies are actually being fought in the global south. A lot of Indian courts have done very good work. The Bombay court, I write in the book, the Bombay court denied Johnson and Johnson the bedaquiline secondary patent on bedaquiline. That happened after the book was published, but TB patients took Johnson and Johnson to court because not only was the research on bedaquiline heavily subsidized, they also tested it out on patients in global south. And then when it's time to bring the thing to the market, so the biggest fights are being, actually it's the same as HIV. The fights are being fought by survivor patients. But then there is another group called Third World Network. Um, Again based in India, that does really good work on challenging patterns. But what's happened increasingly since the HIV epidemic is that not a lot of these litigations take decades, and no one can outspend big pharma. So increasingly, Indian generic companies that made generic HIV drugs, which broke the dam on HIV cartelization, no longer do that because they'd rather just sign a voluntary license with the pharmaceutical company than fight them for decades. And what happens is then they're all in bed, and the patient is not at the center, which I feel hasn't happened since the HIV epidemic, where the patient groups were leading all the activism, and they were, in fact, Global Fund, their governance, their board actually had one seat for a patient, which was unheard of in global health. When
Yeah.
GFATM was formed, yeah. And that I personally feel until we include patients at every table, we will just be talking in silos.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you know if that's still the case right now, that a patient is at the table for the Global Fund?
I don't think so, but it came to my mind while I was speaking. But it's worth looking up because it seems like an obvious thing that you have to take the community with you,
Yeah,
and you know, yeah.
that's interesting. That actually leads into another one of the questions that was popular, which is just what kind of you do spend some time in the book describing the ACT UP movement and the how successful the HIV community was in advocating for the kinds of things that would actually help patients. What kind of lessons do you think we can learn as from the ACT UP movement as we're trying to do the same thing for tuberculosis?
I wrote a paper, academic paper for Mayo Clinic, which I'll send you, which was exactly about this, about TB patients. This is long before my book came out. My background is I've studied sociology, and there is a New Yorker essay by Malcolm Gladwell called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." I will send you these links. And essentially, what it says is that, like with the HIV movement, movements that bring about change are actually they come from what sociologists call close-knit communities. So, loosely knit communities are the ones that, they'd be like, oh, I saw that thing and I retweeted it, but nothing happened. But that is important because you do have to, spread information in this democratic manner that, oh, turn up at that town square for that protest. For that, this loose knit information dissemination is important. But if you look at the history of any kind of uh, highly effective civil disobedience campaign, it has been close-knit communities. So the lunch counter sit-ins in the US, those people who were sitting at those lunch counters were also actually roommates. Um, and what the theory essentially builds up. So in the case of the HIV movement, the networks that fought for the right to access medicine and became ACT UP actually came out of the kind of civil disobedience and the movements that were happening in the 60s for gay rights in San Francisco. So in the 60s and from the 60s to the 70s, there was this gay rights movement. And then in the 90s, when the HIV, in the 80s, when the virus came, and by the 90s, when it was clear that, people are going to die despite having, at that point, experimental medicine, the activists actually relied on the networks they had built during the movements. And in fact, this is true even now. So if you see, I think this was last month after the Trump administration announced its just sweeping cuts to global health. Uh, in South Africa, Zaki Ahmed, all these HIV activists have come out of retirement. In the US, Greg Gonsalves at Yale. There are so many people who are HIV activists who are, again, who should actually be in retirement. They should not be out on the streets again. But they did the exact same thing they did during HIV, where they deposited like a bunch of empty coffins in front of the FDA. Do you remember the famous chant from the HIV time, which was, "Hey, hey, FDA, how many people have you killed today?" And that itself was picked from the chant during the Vietnam War, which was some version of it, which I forget. So what I mean is, in social, things lead to things, um, and what the TB movement can learn. Actually, TB movement, as a health reporter who's covered like a bunch of, TB is not the only thing I cover. TB movement's actually the most open and the most receptive to having these kind of conversations, to asking what more can we do. And again, I see this interest in aligning with Global South, because why should someone like me be talking to someone, an audience like you in a different context, right? I feel like the TB movement is very receptive to the moment, this particular moment in history where there are sweeping health cuts. And as bad as things are in the US because of what Trump administration is doing, they're worse in Asia and Africa because because after the World War, we Second World War, we built this whole system, neoliberal health order, which entirely made Asia and Africa rely on philanthropy. And now all of it's gone. And the US just stopped giving money. And the same thing was then done by UK and Germany and France, and European countries also cut money. So we are actually in a very dark moment in time, and I have a lot of hope from uh, the resistance that is being put up by the TB community.
Yeah, thank you. That's like a really complete answer, and it's really uh, drives home the importance of having people like you um, here to speak with us and out there writing books and articles to sort of tell people what's going on in your part of the world. I had something else that I had thought about, but I guess I'll come back to it because I can't remember. Um, oh, I guess because you were just referring to you also make an argument in the book that philanthropy really can't be the way that we're running our public health systems. And as you're pointing out, we are seeing that play out right now because philanthropy is easy to take away. Um, what do you think? And I guess this goes back to, like, as you were listing all those various organizations earlier for groups that are fighting for patent reform, and as they should be, a lot of them are based in the global south. Is there anything that people like us, people from our organization, can do to support those groups or to support sort of non-philanthropy based efforts for to improve public health in countries like yours?
You know, that's such a searching question, frankly, because I feel like we are now in a moment in time that no one's going to come to help anyone. That's very clear to me. Uh, the pandemic made it amply clear that vaccines were being hoarded, and I feel like commu you know. Hmm, Of course, there is conversation. I feel like making all of us feel less alone is actually very important in this dark time. And I I'm very happy that something like my book or John's book can become a meeting place for like-minded people. And of course, these kind of conversations are important. But the thing is, the most important thing that anyone in the global north can do is hold their own governments accountable and their own because we can't do that. We can barely do that with our own, uh, but then again, with these kind of conversations are more easier than they seem, because uh, I feel like, say, just entirely off the cuff, again, organizations are the only ones that are best placed to say what they need. I am not a activist. I am a reporter, and I would not be able to say, but activism at this moment in India is very dangerous. You can end up in jail. You can be murdered for it. We have activists who have been murdered. And public health is entirely privatized in every part of the world. And what is not privatized is controlled by philanthropy. And I remember after the second wave, which was, I don't know if you recall, these endlessly burning pyres, funeral pyres from India during the second wave. Um, and India had the highest mortality, according to WHO, from COVID in the world. And after all of that, Melinda Gates was in Uttar Pradesh telling the chief minister this completely rabidly right-wing leader, that what Uttar Pradesh did was a model for the rest of the world, with the confidence of a woman who will never have to live in Uttar Pradesh under this kind of governance. But philanthropy actually does a lot of work in propping up right-wing governments in Asia and Africa. And I feel like this prying apart, there is now a lot of criticism of. I was seeing Melinda Gates talking about how Bill Gates is figures in the Epstein files. This is a very murky, business philanthropy, and I feel like in global health we make the mistake of we keep discussing philanthropy as if it's not a political agenda-driven, deeply biased uh, organization with deep biases against post-colonial people. Uh, I, I feel reframing like it's a rambly answer as to what you can do to help us. You're already doing, these kind of conversations are helpful, but it's really important to not buy into these narratives of charity. I personally think philanthropy actually is a gangrene on global health order, and it sounds like a hyperbole, but that's until you come to India and go to a slum and see people die. um, and what is the point of the fact that India is the global manufacturing pharmaceutical hub for generic drugs and vaccines, and yet India was the country with the highest morbidity during COVID? What exactly does that say about the health order? You know?
Yeah. Um, I think that's, yeah, I mean, I think that's very persuasive about um, the the role that philanthropy has played in making some of these situations worse. I guess that also sort of leads. We had another question about COVID. You in the book you mentioned COVID explicitly, sort of in the introduction and in the conclusion. Um, did you change any of the rest of the book at all in response to the pandemic, or because it based on the dates that you conducted interviews, it's pretty clear that you started the book before COVID started and you finished it sometime in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that question. I feel that it was at some point an active decision on my, like it was my very quiet protest, uh, to not let this book be COVIDized, because I was reporting on COVID while writing this book on TB. And I remember getting a call from someone in the Indian Health Ministry saying everything of the national TB policy, down to the helpline, like telephones, were turned towards COVID. And TB patients were just left high and dry. They didn't have medicines. And in fact, if you now see after that gap year, there was just this boomeranging of TB in India and globally, actually.
Yeah, we had the same thing.
And yeah, yeah. And there briefly we had to pause and take an editorial call on what to do. And it was almost, I felt like I didn't need to bring in everything I wrote came to pass, which included patents being weaponized to deny, life-saving therapy to Black and brown people. But forget Black and brown people, they did not even give it to Black and brown citizens of global North. You know, they hoarded all those vaccines, but if you look at the data of maternal mortality and just mortality in Inuit communities in Canada, or in, among African Americans, or any kind of refugees, or immigrants in the global North, you see this pattern, which is just so I felt like you with I feel in global health, we keep having the same conversation, disease after disease. So in the 90s, we had this about HIV, and now we're having about TB, and then we'll have it about COVID. And I think that sucks up so much oxygen in this reinventing of the wheel and trying to convince. I personally have no interest in. Uh, I have no interest in wasting there is so much work to be done in public health, and amongst these kind of communities, I would rather put my shoulder to the wheel there instead of like repeating. I wanted this book to be readable. I wanted it to be. I remember the first draft. The manuscript was around 90,000 words, and when we edited it, it was around 75,000. And everyone was like, "Who's going to read about TV? It's just so boring." And I was like, I will make it interesting. I will put Dracula in it, and I will put fashion in it. And I worked really hard to give the reader something to come all the way. Everything I said before that chapter, in which I talk about what was done to Shreya's family and Shreya, I felt like I needed to do, because I agree it's very difficult to read, but not reading it, and there is no excuse to not to be ignorant, right? Uh, so, and then to that point, I didn't want to add like another 20,000 words to say the same thing about COVID, like, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. It is a lot of the similar conversations, and uh you're right. I think it would have been a lot of the same things that you would have just had to say to
Because I'd already also done it with HIV. I did a
right.
whole detour into the history of HIV to say we did this before,
Right, right, right,
and
right.
then we're doing it now, and then it just, after a while, you just feel like how much evidence is enough to convince you know that just give someone the medicine that they need, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think people have short memories, and that's why, reading books about history is so important. And I think part of the reason that we wanted to make this book club, it's just a book club about tuberculosis. Other people, when I describe this to them, are a little confused. But there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of history and anthropology, sociology lessons to learn, to try not to repeat the same thing when inevitably there's some other infectious disease out there. Um,
Yeah, I had a lot of fun claiming Dracula to be a public health book. So
I think that was fun for us too. We have a lot of English majors among the group, so I think people enjoyed that. You mentioned Shreya's family, and I think I'm gonna skip to a question that we have about that. Um, you have a lot of very sort of arresting, dramatic scenes in your book of various kinds, but I think a lot of us were very struck by the very short phone call that you had with Shreya's mother, where she, was really angry that more people hadn't called her immediately after Shreya passed away, and she felt like that was, a sign that people didn't care about Shreya like as a person. Um, is there anything that you personally would change about how you interacted with Shreya's family?
I don't even know how to respond to that, because I met uh, her father when they used to go to Delhi High Court, uh, you know, when MSF was still, it was just really early days, and there were just a couple of lawyers and some people from MSF and Shreya's family, and one reporter, maybe two, but mostly just one reporter. And I feel this is not about health or science or reporting. I feel as people, we are so uncomfortable by the grief, the discomfort of someone else's grief, that we don't know how to find the holding space for it. And I did not, there was nothing I could say to her mother. I felt bad about having to call. I spoke to a bunch of people the day Shreya passed away, because It's still triggering. In fact, last month I was talking to an activist legal activist who was helping that case through the courts. And she mentioned that, your book is doing well, and someone said something. So I was like, I know you've not read it. And she's like, it's too triggering for me to go through all of it. We called each other. Of course, our pain is nothing compared to her parents. But I feel I was not emotionally mature enough to have holding space for their grief. And I was just too locked in to get my reporting right. And I was also, this is now, 7, 8 years. I mean, in hindsight, I wish I had done things differently. I put that in almost as an apology because I remember my editor saying, "Do you need that?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." You know, it's like it's not like I go to places and everyone's like, "Oh, what a fantastic thing you've done." And I needed this to be there to say, actually, that's also me. We are all flawed. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I think you really don't flinch from holding any number of people accountable, including yourself. I think that makes me think about a question that I had reading the book, and I listened to a couple of podcast interviews that you did with other people to get ready for this. It, it is hard. It is hard to have the emotional space to take in all the suffering that's been inflicted upon people. Um, how do you motivate yourself to keep doing this work?
That's the job. I mean, it's the same. I could ask you as a doctor, right? That's just the job. You turn up and you like my job that I signed up to do was to bear witness, and my job is not to be a doctor, and it's not to be an activist, and it's not to be. Of course, my. I'm glad my work speaks to or pushes some sort of its bias towards healthcare that is affordable, but my primary job is to look at someone who's dying and say, I see you, I know you were here, and I see your story, and I will write it down somewhere so no one forgets, because someone has to do it. And yeah, how do you motivate yourself in the hospital?
Um, I think it's a fair question. I think the reason that I am more of a clinician than a researcher is I do prefer to help people who I can see, and not just like mystery number of people out there. Like if you develop a new drug, then you can give it to like millions of people, but you'll probably never meet any of them. And in fact, it might be 20 years from when you publish one paper that the drug actually gets into human people's bodies. Um, so I think I like the interpersonal interaction. I think it feels a little bit more like something that is under my agency. I think on like a one, like I can't fix the entire healthcare system, but I can devote my personal resources and then just the other resources that my institution gives me to making sure this one patient gets the drug I think they should get. And some of it is like, as you say, just bearing witness. I mean, I'm going into neuro-oncology. Sometimes you can't, sometimes people are going to die. Like we don't have really good treatments for glioblastoma. And I think some of it is just being with them. Just accompaniment is the word I think that Paul Farmer liked to use. Um, so in that way, maybe it's not so different.
Yeah, yeah. It's in a world so fraught and so cruel, most people just want to be like, I see you, I'm sorry this is being done to you. It's not okay, not all battles have to be fought for great victories. Some of these battles just have to be fought so people know that someone was out there in the arena saying it's not okay, just fighting it, not to win. I mean, it's great if you win, but I will never join the other side. I will never be like, oh, great, this is all I can do.
Yeah, I think that's in a way reassuring for us, as I've been asking you, like, what can we do? Um, I do think that this community puts a lot of emphasis on educating ourselves and just putting our voices out there and saying, yeah, this is not okay. We did you had mentioned holding our governments accountable. We did just finish a 45-day period of having a lot of phone calls to our government in after which they passed a package we didn't want them to pass. So we lost that one, but we got one win. We saved PEPFAR from we. I mean, it definitely not just us, but the,
Yeah,
the community, the people that made the calls, and we were part of it. Did get a little win out of that. Did succeed in uh stopping these particular cuts to PEPFAR. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But you take the little wins where you can get them, and I do think it's reassuring to have you tell us that, like, it does mean something, that we tried. We tried, and some of us went to Capitol Hill a couple of months ago, and I think the TV, even if we didn't change anyone's mind while we were there, which I think we did, but even if we didn't, um, I do think that the TV survivors who were there appreciated just seeing our physical bodies show up.
yeah, yeah. And that is so important. It's so compassionate. It's so um, it's such a human. It's love in its purest form for not someone who's your mother or father or someone you gave birth to, just because that other person is a human being and deserves to be treated, you know, in that way. But we have so many losses that we take, and I everywhere I speak, I say that hopelessness is also, a luxury. This is not a moment where we can afford to be hopeless, because in India we are not getting up and thinking like, again, you guys are in like second year of your Mad King. We are in the 11th year of our Mad King. Uh, and we don't wake up every day and think about hope. This is life right now, and you have to wake up and you have to do these X number of things, which is to call the representative or go witness something, or and hopefully if enough people do it, it amounts to something. But even if they don't, and even if it doesn't amount to something, you will still have done right. You will still have the right bragging rights to say, when this was going down, I was on the right side. So
Yeah, thanks for being on. Glad we're all on the same side. Um, let's see. What else did I want to ask? I guess this is like kind of a pertinent question. Out of all of the doctors and scientists and advocates that you have interviewed for your various writing, who do you most look up to and why?
I feel like it's unfair because there's so many of, like, I completely and totally admire Dr. Furin, Jennifer Furin, who came to India and said things at a time that no one was willing to say. And she was trolled for it and harassed. And uh, of course, journalists do it all the time, but Jennifer Furin did not have to do it. The same is for Professor Mitnick. The same is true for Madhupai. There are so many clinicians who see science. Advocacy has to be a part of science. Otherwise, science can just sit in its lab and be useless. But then, throughout the time that I was reporting and writing this book, so many people died. Uh, and it just broke my heart that one of my last interviews was with Dr. Farmer, and then he also passed away. So I think I think, Dr. Farmer, I really wish he was just such a ray of sunshine in, like, in this complete darkness. What we are all for each other are these pinpricks of light. through which you kind of make sense of the darkness itself. You see the size of darkness through these people who are just small pinpricks of light. And I feel like in that space, he was like a sunbeam, not a pinprick. And it was just that was not fun that happened.
You have such an evocative way of talking. I like that also. The pinpricks of light amongst the darkness. Yeah, we're gonna read the next book that we're doing after yours. Is Mountains Beyond Mountains, which is all about Dr. Farmer. So we're excited to read that, and a lot of us have watched Bending the Arc, the PIH documentary. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we're also big fans.
yeah. I feel at this point I'm just jealous of the dead. It's just easier.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. We were just talking yesterday about, we're a little, I think our group's also at this particular moment a little tired, because we have just finished this big push where we were all trying to energize each other to call our government every single day, and then, it was a long shot anyway, and then they passed the thing that we didn't want them to pass. Um, but yeah, we were just talking yesterday about what we can about the need of taking a break once in a while, and of just sort of being in community with each other.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to like put love in your own body. It's you can't do anything for anyone else if you're not taking care of yourself. So yeah, I was actually when the I was speaking to a bunch of through the Neiman Foundation. I was speaking to a bunch of American journalists and this year's fellows of Neiman Foundation when the election results came out, and I was like, pick up a sport, do yoga or run or something, because you've got to outlast this and you need to be in good health for that. And I will say, like, it's, after the book, I was writing the book while covering the pandemic, while attending classes at Harvard. And by the time I came back to India, I had to go into therapy, and I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, and I have severe anxiety. But that can't come in the way of, my reporting. I can't be the problem in, if I'm not a solution, then I'm not helping. So I had to like slow down and do what was needed for me before I could go back out again. So yeah, please do that. What you guys do is so important.
Yeah, I'm also glad that you found the help that you needed, and sort of took that cue. I think I mean, I think like I said, I think I could have joined a lot of other like neurology related causes. There's any number of stroke treatments that could be better done in other parts of the world. And actually, well, we can talk about that at a different time. You had talked about okay, what I originally wanted to say was I could have done neurology advocacy, but I chose TB advocacy because I already like these people, and I think that helps a lot, and it's much more motivating and more fun that way.
It
Um,
it comes back to that point of close-knit
yeah,
groups that do high, what's it called? It's close-knit groups that do effective activism. And it's true not just for TB or HIV, it's also true for the Mujahideen or the terror groups. Because, if you go and your brother needs to call you and join the ISIS. You'll not just walk in to join the ISIS, right?
that's
Uh,
interesting.
it's I will send you that New Yorker piece that Malcolm Gladwell wrote it, and he talks about the kind of networks that are useful for certain kind of high risk activism.
Yeah,
That can only come from a tightly knit group.
that's very interesting. And I think yeah, also speaks to something that we've realized about this. Not to just like spend this is supposed to be your interview and not just me telling you how much TB Fighters is great, but yeah, I think it helps a lot that we had a community sort of pre-built before we started being about tuberculosis. Like this is a community that's been around since probably 2007, some of us at the earliest, and we didn't start being about tuberculosis until about 2 years ago. But I think we had a lot pre-built. Maybe to make this actually a question for you, what communities are you a part of that helps you like continue your work?
I write. So I feel like the community that I'm a part of, I actually feel like I was just born at a time where I just didn't get the memo. And I just, I'm living around people that make no, like, I don't think so. I was in the US for the second wave, but the first wave, if in India, there were people who were doing cow urine shots, and the prime minister was like, do yoga as prophylaxis for TB. And you could tell them that coronavirus is made of butter and people would believe it, and it's just so what community I'm a part of, I feel like I'm a writer, so I'm a part of a community which has a long tradition of just watching societies self-destruct and take notes. Uh, so that's what I do. I read a lot of James Baldwin, and I read a lot of Russian literature. I don't know if you're familiar with this journalist called Svetlana Alexievich, uh, who just won a Nobel for literature. And there are so many journalists. Journalists are under attack in every part of the world right now. So I would say it's not advocacy, because journalists have their own code of ethics, like doctors do, that, we can't intervene and we can't change the order of things in certain ways. In other ways, we are supposed to intervene, like by writing. So yeah, that would be that would be my tribe. But then as I said when you invited me, I would like an honorary membership to
Oh, you're
this
definitely
community.
already a member. I don't think you're just honorary.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have been diverting a little bit from the questions that I was asked to ask you, so I just want to see if there's something else that I really want to get in before we wrap up. Hmm. Yeah, we haven't really covered this. This is about the first bit of the book where you talk about Semmelweis and the hand washing thing, and how he really had all the data to prove that he was right, but he was not successful because um he couldn't explain why it worked, and because his manner was a little bit abrasive. And then you talked about the thing with the spitting, where the most effective way to curb spitting was through essentially harm reduction, like practical measures, like giving people spittoons instead of fining them or whatever for spitting. What lessons do you think these examples offer for communicating contemporary public health ideas and driving behavior change today?
Hmm. Again, isn't that the question? I study behavior change. I'm fascinated by behavior change. In 2005, overnight, India went from indoor smoking to smoking being banned indoors overnight. And India is one of the largest. So that's such a behavior change experiment. If you're interested in this, you should totally look up how India managed to do that, because there was no easing it in. And I personally think all radical civil disobedience and all behavior change comes from speaking from, say, if you talk about the Gandhian protest. Um, Actually, there's gender also in it. I feel like when women want something, or when oppressed minorities want something, they are constantly told, oh, this is going to take time and we should, bide ourselves and move the envelope and inch forward. Whereas when men want something, like Gandhi wanted independence now, he wasn't like, in 10 years, you give us. Of course, he did negotiate with the British, and it did take decades. But that was not Gandhi's demand, that give me independence in 30 years. He was like, you gotta go now. And I feel that a lot of, we forget how much space we have ceded, in our own language of trying to be polite and trying to take everyone together. I personally think that for any kind of radical change, this is true for US, it's true for India, it's true for South Africa. I study, um as I said, these kind of movements that bring about what brings more freedom to societies. So, for every Dr. King, you need a Malcolm X. For every Gandhi who was a pacifist, you need a Bhagat Singh who was like, I don't want to talk to these people. I want to pick up the gun and go. And both these things, we tend to talk about these things as if they're mutually exclusive. Like, how um, the health movement has to be polite. And a lot of people tell me, I remember this Australian newspaper had reviewed Phantom Plague and said that the book is incandescent with rage. And, I was like, first of all, it's 2025. Why are we saying female writers are angry? It's just not fashionable anymore. But then my question was, can you write 300 pages when you are angry? I'm actually not an angry person. That's actually why I can process it in such a way and write it. Uh, but then also, why are you not looking around? Why are you not angry? Like, what will it take for you to be angry? I personally think anger is such a motivating force for bringing about change, and we almost activism, advocacy movements almost don't want to touch it because it's just too much. We will not get our way if we do that. And I feel like right now, Titanic is going down. I think it's time to go into conversation fist first, you know, just um
Hey, fist first. Josie says, everyone else would like to assure you that you are a full TB fighter and not just an honorary. Absolutely.
I am honored. This is a group I am very honored to be a part of.
Oh, we appreciate that. We're honored to have you. Um, and
I'd like some merchandise. I have seen your sister.
I don't know if JD's on screen. I showed Vidya my bracelet and she wants one. One of the other fighters made that for me. Um, so great. I think we're coming to the end of the time that we have. So I wanted to thank you so much again for giving us your time and just being so open during this interview. I really, really enjoyed speaking with you and hearing your insights about tuberculosis and about global health in general. Would you like to offer any other closing thoughts, or do you have anything else that you'd like to plug?
I would like to say that what you do gives us hope. What you do gives everyone a lot of hope. I imagine this fantasy land where the TV fighters are this is what the HIV movement did, that they were not just the South African movement or the American movement, it was a global movement. And I do imagine the Indian activists and TV fighters. Um, in fact, I feel like I will send you again this story. The Indian government has been putting up, it has a TB policy saying adopt a TB patient. Uh, and it's so humiliating because a TB patient then has to go and stand in front of some CEO or whatever who'd be like, oh, we'll give you 6 months of medicines, we'll sponsor it. And then he gets a photo and the government gives them a certificate. This person's privacy is there's just no privacy. But also, most of these companies then don't follow through on paying that money that is needed for the treatment. And it is so humiliating that the Indian government currently has this adopt a TB patient policy. I, if I can, in some way, bridge the gap between the TB fighters in the US or in global north and the survivor patients who are running activist groups here, I'd be very happy to facilitate that.
Yeah, I mean, you have a bunch of our emails now, so if you want to connect us with groups, I
Yeah.
think we'd be happy to be connected.
Yeah. I feel like if they can, because many of them can't say what they want here without going to jail, and I feel like you can do the same for them. But also, it also embarrasses the Indian government more when it's coming from you.
Interesting.
So,
That's a dynamic I did not think about. Um,
yeah. On that cheerful note,
um, Yeah, I think we're just about at time. So thank you so much to everyone
Thank you.
here. If you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to join our TB Readers book club by following the link in the description of this video. And you can get to the Discord that way. And you can also use the hashtag TBReaders on social media. Our next book, which will be kicking off in the next week, is Mountains Beyond Mountains by Tracy Kidder, which describes a lot of the life and work of Dr. Paul Farmer, who we've mentioned a lot in this conversation. And so to find out more about TB Fighters and everything else that we do, go to tbfighters.org or follow us on social media at TBFighters. One more thank you to Vidya and to everyone who attended. See you next time.